Hello, my name is Kara and I'm a school counseling graduate student at Mercer University, and today I would like to address the topic of adolescent addiction. This is a topic that's especially important to me as a future school counselor because it's the population that I could be working with. I like to start with an interesting statistic. Approximately 95% of individuals with a lifetime dependence to drugs or alcohol first started using those drugs or alcohol as an adolescent. And this is really important when you consider the discrepancy between the fact that the average person doesn't actually show up to treatment until they've been using for over 20 years on average. So therefore, I think it's really important to address the fact that there is a discrepancy between the fact that most people start using as a teenager or an adolescent, but they don't get treatment until much later in life. I'd like to start by addressing and informing you about the teenage brain. It's important to note that the adolescent brain is different than the adult brain, which in turn can lead to how come so many adolescents get addicted to alcohol or drugs compared to adults. This can be first addressed by looking at a picture of the brain. The prefrontal cortex right here is a really important part of the brain for teenagers. It's the part that involves emotions and motivational processing, basically including regulation of craving drugs and food. And this area of the brain is less developed in adolescents, which makes them in turn more vulnerable to engaging in addictive behaviors such as smoking, drinking, or any type of illicit drug. Another important area is the hippocampal region. This area can be affected by the use of alcohol or drugs. Particularly alcohol use can decrease the development of the brain right here, negatively impacting a lot of areas in development for an adolescent. It can impact the ability to form memories, it can impact visual spatial ability, and in turn can affect how an individual is able to plan ahead and consider consequences. So I think it's really important when working with teenagers to be able to understand how different parts of the brain can be affected and impacted by the use of drugs or alcohol. So an area of addiction in adolescence that's particularly important to me is the use of alcohol. This is because alcohol is responsible for the most health problems related to all substance abuse among adolescents. In particular, in any given month, over 4 million people under the age of 21 admit to consuming alcohol. In fact, according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, 1 in 2 teens drank alcohol in the last year, and 75% of all students reported consuming at least one alcoholic beverage in their lifetime. In fact, 16% of all alcohol sales are contributed to by minors. And this is a huge problem. I know these sound like just statistics to you, but the reason this is important is because of the consequences of 50% of teens drinking and 75% of all students drinking at least once in their lifetime. That's because individuals who begin drinking before the age of 13 are much more likely to binge drink. For females, that means 4 or more drinks in one night or given sitting, or 5 or more drinks for a male. In addition, these individuals who start drinking before age 13 are more likely to drink at least 6 times a month, which can be quite dangerous and in turn lead to addiction. Another issue to address is the issue of comorbidity. Approximately 45% of individuals who begin drinking before the age of 14 develop mental disorders in addition. The mental disorders that are especially likely are conduct disorder, anxiety, ADHD, and depression, which are all mental disorders that are prominent in adolescence, but the likelihood of developing one while drinking or being addicted to drugs increases dramatically. Another problem that results from the use of alcohol or drug abuse in teenagers is that it can lead to lower grades in school and impact academic performance. It also increases risk-taking behaviors such as engaging in unsafe sex, which can result in unwanted pregnancies or the contraction of HIV, the use of illicit drugs, carrying guns or weapons, and committing crimes that would have normally not been committed if not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Additionally, there are often unintended costs that come along with alcohol or drug abuse. Oftentimes, if using alcohol and driving a vehicle, there will be some type of accident. So a motor vehicle crash can be a cause, which can often lead to death, overdose, the medical costs that can be associated with addiction. These adolescents can possibly lose their jobs, can be kicked out of school, and overall often have a decreased quality of living. In addition to alcohol, there are other drugs that are becoming more popular among adolescents. In fact, over the past 10 years, the abuse of painkillers has increased by over 300%. Stimulants have increased by over 90%, and daily marijuana use has increased by over 100%. In fact, 1 in 5 teens has abused prescription pain relievers in their lifetime. 1 in 4 teens have smoked in the past month. And 1 in 3 teens have abused marijuana in their lifetime. And these are kind of shocking statistics when you consider that these are all events that are occurring in our school. So it's really important that parents become more aware. School counselors and clinical mental health clinicians are aware of these rising statistics. In addition, if you are going to be working with teens or adolescents, it's really important to be aware of the factors that can influence the probability of drug or alcohol use in teens. Some environmental factors that can influence or impact drug or alcohol use include previous child abuse or previous neglect, the exposure to drugs, poverty, a lack of parental supervision, media influence, and or peer pressure. And some internal factors can include low self-esteem, poor social skills, and just the general attitude that the teen or adolescent has about drugs themselves. It's also important to note the effect a transition period can have on the influence of drug or alcohol in a student's life. Just periods of transition including puberty, moving to a new state or city, divorce, leaving the security of a home, and school transition. So for example, transitioning from middle to high school can be a particularly vulnerable time for many adolescents. So these are times that if you are a parent or an adult who can impact a student life, to be particularly aware that these can be a time of influence. It is important to note, however, that not all youth will develop substance abuse problems, even if they've experienced most or all of these factors. There are preventative measures as well. It's also interesting to note that adolescents are more likely to be influenced by those people who drink or smoke around them than those who don't. So if an adolescent has a parent who drinks regularly or a couple of friends who drink regularly, they're much more likely to be influenced to drink or use drugs by those individuals as opposed to other friends or family members who don't. Additionally, the media can play a huge role on adolescents and their perception of alcohol. Over the past couple of years, research has shown that on average, teens see more advertisements for alcohol than they do for normal teenage products such as jeans, juice, games, things of that nature. And this positive alcohol advertising has had an impact on drug and alcohol use in teenagers. So that's another interesting area to consider, is how is the media affecting your child and their perception of alcohol. Okay, if you are a parent or an adult in a school, it is important to be able to recognize behaviors in a teenager that might indicate drug or alcohol abuse. So the major changes that you can often see or observe in these types of students or adolescents are mood changes. Oftentimes, these individuals will become more irritable, they can become more defensive, they might have more of a temper than they used to. Academic problems are very regular for these students. Often their attendance declines, their grades appear to be lower, and oftentimes they're being called to the office for disciplinary action that is out of the norm for them. Oftentimes, they have started to find and change friends. they become reluctant to allow their parents or family members meet these friends. So if your child is all of a sudden hanging out with a new group of friends and you've never met any of them, that is a sign sometimes that you should be aware of. Oftentimes, these teenagers start to have this nothing matters attitude. They typically may have lower energy than you're used to seeing, and oftentimes they stop caring for things that they used to be involved in, and they don't care for activities that they used to interest them. Additionally, you might observe physical and mental changes in these students. They might have more memory lapses. They might not be concentrating as well when you're talking to them, or not doing quite as well in school. They might appear to be less coordinated, or you might observe slurred speech. These are all things that you can physically see in them that might be different than from before they were using drugs or alcohol. And finally, this might seem like an obvious answer, but you might find substance or like drug or alcohol in the child's room or their personal effects. And together, these are all things that if you're seeing multiple signs of these, your child might be using drugs or alcohol. So therefore, it's really imperative that as school personnel, as a counselor, or as a parent, or even as a friend, that you're taking steps to prevent substance or drug abuse in adolescents. Basically, it's really imperative that these measures of change are put in place at an early age to prevent addiction. Intervening early is always better, especially intervening before high school is absolutely critical. The earlier you make the changes, the more likely the changes will occur and be long-lasting. Research shows that when parents talk openly about drugs and drinking, that children have better self-control, and they tend to develop more negative perceptions about these risky behaviors. Furthermore, children and adolescents who learn about the risks of drug and alcohol from their parents are up to 50% less likely to use drugs or alcohol than those who are not informed about the risks by their parents. And some really good references that you can use if you're a parent or somebody who's trying to prevent things for students in the school are the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. These are great resources. There's lots of information and lesson plans and facts to really help put prevention in place for these students. In conclusion, I think that the topic of substance abuse in adolescence is extremely important. Like I said earlier, 95% of individuals with a lifetime dependence to drugs or alcohol start using as an adolescent. The earlier the intervention is, the better. The more difference you can make in that teen's life. So therefore, as a future school counselor, I believe that creating awareness, we can lower the rates of alcohol and drug abuse in teens in the United States. Thank you.